Tonight, we are entering one of the strangest battle stories in the book of Judges. The story of Gideon and the army that was cut down to only 300 men before the war even began. This is not only a story about a small army defeating a larger one. The deeper mystery begins earlier, before the shouting, before the trumpets, before the clay jars break in the night. Gideon gathers thousands of men to face Midian, an enemy so vast that the biblical text compares them to locusts spread across the valley. And then, at the very moment when any commander would want more soldiers, God tells him he has too many. The army is reduced once, then it is reduced again. By the time Gideon stands on the edge of battle, he does not have 32,000 men. He does not even have 10,000. He has 300. And those 300 do not enter the darkness carrying the weapons we would expect from an army preparing for war. They carry trumpets, empty jars, and torches hidden inside clay. So the question guiding this story is simple, but unsettling. Why would God make Gideon's army almost impossibly small before sending him against Midian? To understand that, we have to go back before the victory, before the night attack, before the enemy camp collapsed into panic. We have to begin with a man who did not look like a warrior at all. Gideon was not introduced standing proudly on a battlefield. He was not calling men to arms. He was not speaking from a city gate or holding a sword beneath the open sky. He was hiding. Israel was living under the shadow of Midian. Fields that should have held harvest were being destroyed. Animals were taken. Families retreated into caves, mountains, and hidden places, trying to survive in their own land. The danger did not only come during formal battles, it came into the rhythm of daily life. It came at harvest time, when families waited to see whether the food they had grown would remain theirs long enough to be eaten. And somewhere inside that fear, Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress, trying to save food where Midian would not easily see it. That is where the story begins, not with strength, but with fear, not with an army, but with a man hiding grain. And into that hidden place, the call of God arrives. Before Gideon ever stood before an army, he stood inside a wounded question. The people of Israel had heard stories of rescue. They knew the memory of Egypt, the sea, the wilderness, and the God who had once delivered their ancestors from slavery. But in Gideon's lifetime, those stories must have felt distant. The land was no longer a place of safety. When Midian came, the people did not meet them in confidence. They hid. The biblical text describes a world where ordinary life had been broken. Midian and the people of the east came up against Israel like a swarm, consuming what the land produced. Crops were destroyed. Livestock was taken. What should have been the rhythm of planting and harvest became a rhythm of fear. Israel's suffering was not only military, it entered homes, fields, storage places, and the quiet anxiety of families wondering how long they could survive. Gideon appears inside that world, threshing wheat in a winepress. The image is small, but it carries the weight of the whole story. Wheat was normally threshed in an open place, where wind could help separate grain from chaff. A winepress was lower, more enclosed, more hidden. Gideon is not standing in the proper place for abundance. He is working in a place of concealment, trying to protect what little his family still has. Imagine the scene in animation, stone walls low around him, dust moving in narrow shafts of light, the sound of grain being beaten softly instead of openly. Every movement has to be careful. Every noise might feel too loud. The land outside belongs to Israel in memory, but not in experience. Fear has made the open field dangerous. Then the angel of the Lord appears and says, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." The words almost seem to clash with the scene. Gideon is not acting like a mighty warrior. He is not leading troops or challenging Midian. He is hiding food from raiders. And yet the divine call does not name him by the fear visible in that moment. It names him by the role he has not yet believed possible. Gideon's answer is not bold. He does not immediately rise with confidence. He asks why all this has happened if the Lord is with Israel. He asks where the wonders are, the stories told by the fathers, the memory of deliverance from Egypt. His question is not abstract theology. It is the cry of a man looking at ruined fields and hidden grain, trying to understand the distance between inherited faith and present suffering. This makes Gideon deeply human. He is not introduced as fearless. He is introduced as someone who has heard of God's power, but lives under the weight of God's seeming silence. He is called into courage before he feels courageous. He is named a warrior before he can see himself as one. When he is told to go and save Israel from Midian, Gideon does not argue that Midian is not dangerous. He looks at himself. He says his clan is weak, and he is the least in his father's house. His first answer to the call is not rebellion, but inadequacy. How can I save Israel? That question never fully disappears. It follows him into every later scene. It follows him when he asks for signs. It follows him when men gather around him. It follows him when those men are sent away. It follows him down into the valley at night, toward the fires of Midian. And that is what makes the story so strange. God does not answer Gideon's weakness by surrounding him with obvious strength. He does not give him a victory that looks safe. He does not allow the story to become a normal tale of a strong leader, a large army, and a predictable campaign. Instead, God begins with a hiding man. Then he will make the army small enough to match the mystery. Gideon's call did not turn him instantly into a man without fear. The story allows his hesitation to remain visible. He receives the word, but he needs assurance. He is told that the Lord will be with him, but he asks for a sign. He prepares an offering, and the biblical text describes fire rising from the rock and consuming what he has brought. Gideon realizes he has encountered the angel of the Lord, and fear overtakes him again. Not fear of Midian this time, but fear that he has come too close to the divine presence. The answer he receives is peace. Do not be afraid. That word matters because Gideon's journey is not a sudden transformation from fear into confidence. It is slower than that. He is being moved, step by step, from hiding toward obedience. Each movement asks more of him than the last. The story also places Gideon's fear in a larger world of divided worship. Before he faces Midian openly, He is told to tear down his father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. This moment belongs to Judges 6, and it shows that Israel's crisis is not only outside them. The enemy in the valley is real, but so is the spiritual fracture within their own villages and households. Gideon obeys, but he does it at night because he is afraid of his family and the men of the town. That detail should not be rushed past. Even when he takes a courageous step, fear still shapes the way he takes it. He is moving forward, but not yet with daylight confidence. The man who will later act in darkness against Midian first obeys in darkness at home. This makes his growth feel honest. Courage in this story is not the absence of trembling. It is obedience that begins while trembling is still there. Gideon later asks for another sign, the sign of the fleece. He places wool on the threshing floor and asks that dew fall only on the fleece while the ground remains dry. In the morning, the fleece is wet enough to wring out water into a bowl, while the ground around it is dry. But even this does not settle him completely. He asks again, this time for the reverse, the fleece dry, the ground wet. The biblical story does not present Gideon as a man who never trembles. It presents him as a man whose faith is being carried through trembling. He speaks carefully, almost afraid to ask too much, yet still needing something he can see and touch. The fleece becomes an image of faith not yet steady enough to walk without confirmation. It would be easy to turn this into a simple lesson, but the story is more delicate. Gideon is not praised because doubt is ideal. He is not condemned into silence because he is weak. Instead, God meets him in the place where he is, giving him enough assurance to keep moving. But the assurance is not the end of the test. That is the important part. Gideon has received signs, but he has not yet faced the deepest contradiction. He has asked God to confirm the mission, and God has answered. Now Gideon must learn that the mission will not unfold according to human comfort. The signs do not mean the road will become easier. They mean he must keep walking when it becomes harder. Because soon Gideon will gather an army. For a moment, that must have looked like strength finally arriving. Men come together. Israel begins to respond. The hiding man is no longer alone in a wine press. There are thousands around him now. Voices, weapons, campfires, movement, the first visible shape of resistance. Perhaps Gideon could breathe differently for the first time. Perhaps the sound of men gathering made the call feel more believable. Fear is easier to bear when it has numbers beside it. A man who doubts himself can feel stronger when others stand near him. But the danger of visible strength is that it can quietly become the story. If Israel wins with a force that seems large enough, then the victory can be explained in ordinary terms. People can say the right leader rose at the right time. The tribes gathered. The strategy worked. Israel saved itself. The biblical text will not allow that explanation to stand. Gideon's signs have shown him that God is with him, but the next sign will be stranger. It will not be fire from a rock. It will not be dew on fleece. It will be the sound of thousands of men walking away. The man who needed reassurance is about to watch his support disappear. Gideon and his men rise early and camp near the spring of Harod, north of them. in the valley, lies the camp of Midian. The image is almost overwhelming. Israel has gathered, but Midian still appears immense. The biblical text describes the Midianites, Amalekites, and people of the east as numerous as locusts, with camels beyond counting, like sand on the seashore from the high ground. Gideon could look down and see the enemy spread through the valley, not as a small raiding party, but as a force large enough to make courage feel unreasonable. At this point, human logic would ask for more soldiers, not fewer, more men, more weapons, more confidence, more visible strength. Gideon has already shown fear. Israel has already suffered. Midian already looks too large. But then God says something that changes the meaning of the entire battle. The people with Gideon are too many. The reason is given clearly in the biblical text. If Israel wins with too many men, they may boast against God and say, "My own hand has saved me." The battle must be shaped in such a way that its meaning cannot be stolen by pride. Before Midian is defeated, Israel's explanation of the victory has to be stripped away. This is the central reversal of the story. In most battles, the question is how to gain enough power to win. In Gideon's battle, the question becomes how much visible power must be removed before the victory can speak clearly. The enemy remains large, but Israel must become small. The valley remains full, but Gideon's camp must become emptier. So Gideon announces that anyone who is afraid may leave. 22,000 men go home. Imagine the silence after that movement. A camp that had sounded full now thins out. Lines of men turn away from the battlefield. Fires are abandoned. Footsteps fade along the slopes. What remains is not the army Gideon first gathered, but a smaller, quieter force of 10,000. For a normal commander, this would already feel like disaster. More than 2/3 of the army is gone, and the enemy below remains as vast as before. Gideon could still count 10,000 men, but now every number carries the memory of what has been lost. Then God says there are still too many. This is the second cut, and it is the one that makes the story almost unbearable. 10,000 might still be imagined as a smaller army with a chance. 300 cannot be explained that way. At the water, the men are separated by the way they drink. The biblical text does not fully explain why this manner of drinking is the chosen test. Some readers have imagined that one group looked more alert than the other, but the story itself does not pause to build that explanation. What matters in the text is that God uses this moment to divide the army once more. The scene is quiet compared to the battle that will come. There is no thunder, no trumpet, no shouting, only men bending toward water, hands lifting, mouths drinking, Gideon watching as the number narrows again. It is a strange place for the fate of a battle to be decided, not in a war council, not on the battlefield, but beside water, in an ordinary human act. When the selection is finished, only 300 remain. The rest are sent away. At this point, the space around Gideon becomes part of the message. The army has not simply been reduced. It has been reduced beyond normal confidence, from 32,000 to 10,000, from 10,000 to 300. The visible strength of Israel has been cut down until it can no longer carry the glory of the coming victory. This is the center of the story. The battle is being won in meaning before it is fought in the valley. God is not merely preparing Gideon to defeat Midian. He is preparing Israel to understand the defeat of Midian correctly. The army had to become too small to explain. And for Gideon, this must have been the hardest lesson yet. He had begun as a man who felt like the least in his house. He had asked for signs because he needed assurance. Now, after all that, God takes away the very thing that might have made him feel safe. Gideon is not being asked to believe while supported by obvious strength. He is being asked to believe after obvious strength has been removed. Below him, Midian still fills the valley. Around him, 300 men remain. The question is no longer whether Gideon can gather an army. The question is whether he can obey when the army is too small to make sense. That night, God gives him one more mercy. If he is afraid, he may go down to the enemy camp and listen. So Gideon goes into the dark. The night before battle is one of the most cinematic moments in the story. The Israelite camp is small now, almost impossibly small. 300 men wait above a valley filled with enemies. Midian's fires burn below them, scattered across the darkness like a second sky fallen to the ground. The danger is no longer distant. It breathes in the valley. God tells Gideon to go down to the camp because he has given it into his hand. But the instruction also includes a gentle recognition of Gideon's fear. If you are afraid to attack, go down with your servant Purah and listen to what they say. Afterward, your hands will be strengthened. The story does not hide Gideon's fear. Even now, after the calling, after the signs, after the selection of the 300, fear is still close enough that God speaks to it. Gideon goes down with Purah, not as a triumphant commander marching openly, but as a man moving quietly toward the edge of an enemy camp in the night. This descent is important. Gideon does not receive his final encouragement from a safe distance. He receives it near the thing that terrifies him. He has to move toward the lights of Midian, toward the murmurs, the animals, the sleeping soldiers, the low noises of a camp that could swallow his tiny force in a moment. Courage here is not loud. It is two figures slipping through darkness, careful with every step. There, he hears something he was never meant to arrange. A man in the Midianite camp is telling his companion a dream. In the dream, a round loaf of barley bread tumbles into the camp of Midian. It strikes a tent with such force that the tent overturns and collapses. The image is strange, almost humble. Not a sword from heaven, not a flaming chariot, not a great stone from a mountain. A loaf of barley bread, the food of ordinary people, the food of the poor, rolling into the camp and bringing down a tent. Then the companion interprets the dream. This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given Midian and the whole camp into his hand. The reversal is quiet, but enormous. Until now, Israel has seemed like the frightened side. Gideon hid from Midian. The people suffered under Midian. Thousands of Israelite soldiers left because they were afraid. Yet here, inside the enemy camp, fear is already speaking Gideon's name. Midian looks powerful from above, but from within, it is not unshaken. Beneath the numbers, beneath the camels, beneath the tents spread across the valley, there is a crack. The enemy that seemed like a swarm is also a camp full of men who dream, whisper, interpret, and fear. The barley loaf is not explained by the narrator in a long symbolic lesson. It does not need to be. Its smallness is enough. A plain, poor, ordinary thing rolls into the center of power and overturns what seemed secure. Gideon and his 300 are like that image, small enough to be dismissed, yet caught inside a purpose far larger than themselves. For Gideon, this is the confirmation he needs. He does not rush first to give orders. The biblical text says that when he hears the dream and its interpretation, he worships before the attack begins, before the jars break, before the trumpets sound. Gideon bows. That moment matters. It shows that the victory is not born from sudden self-confidence. Gideon has not become brave because he now believes in himself in a modern sense. He has heard from the mouth of the enemy that the battle belongs to God. Only then does he return to the camp. When Gideon comes back to the 300, the night has changed. The army is still small. The weapons are still strange. Midian is still below them, but Gideon has heard what fear sounds like on the other side. He tells his men to rise. The Lord has given the camp of Midian into your hands. Now the story moves toward its final image, 300 men, divided into companies, standing in darkness with trumpets, clay jars, and hidden fire. This will not look like ordinary war. That is the point. Gideon divides the 300 men into 3 companies. He gives each man a trumpet and an empty jar with a torch hidden inside. The objects are almost startling in their simplicity. These are not the symbols of a great army. They are not heavy shields, chariots, or siege weapons. A trumpet can make sound. A jar can be broken. A torch can burn. Yet in this story, those objects become the shape of obedience. Gideon tells the men to watch him and do what he does. When he and those with him blow their trumpets, the others are to blow theirs from around the camp and cry out. The plan depends on timing, darkness, surprise, and trust. The men must stand in their places before they know exactly how Midian will respond. There is almost no room for personal glory in this strategy. No warrior can charge forward and make himself the center of the story. No one can win the battle by superior swordsmanship in the first moment. Each man has a place to stand, a sound to make, a jar to break, a torch to reveal. The whole action is coordinated, simple, and terrifying in its suddenness. They reach the edge of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, just after the guards have changed. It is a vulnerable hour when the night is deep, the body is tired, and the mind is not fully clear around the valley. The 3 companies take their positions. For a moment, there is stillness. Then the trumpets sound. The jars break. The torches flare into view. In one sudden instant, the darkness around Midian becomes filled with noise and fire. What had been hidden inside clay is now exposed. What had been silent now echoes through the valley. The Midianite camp wakes into confusion, surrounded by sound, light, and shouting from every side. For soldiers startled out of sleep, the scene must have felt impossible to understand. Trumpets were often associated with military movement. torches flashing from multiple directions could suggest a much larger force. Voices echoing around the camp would make the darkness feel alive with attackers. In the confusion of night, perception itself becomes part of the battlefield. But the biblical text does not reduce the victory to clever psychology. It says that the Lord caused the men in the camp to turn their swords against one another. The panic is real. The timing is real. The strategy is real. But the story frames the collapse of Midian as divine deliverance. The 300 stand in their places around the camp. That detail is important. They do not rush in as a normal army might. They stand. The panic begins inside Midian. The vast army that looked unstoppable becomes unable to distinguish friend from enemy in the dark. The force that once drove Israel into hiding now breaks under its own confusion. The victory comes through collapse, and Gideon's 300 remain as witnesses to a victory too strange to claim as ordinary battle. This is why the army had to be reduced. If 32,000 men had attacked and won, the story could have been told as a military success. If 10,000 had charged down the slopes, the victory might still have sounded like human courage, human numbers, human strength. But 300 men with trumpets, jars, and torches cannot easily carry that explanation. The battle was made too small so the meaning would become clear. The clay jars are not explained in the text as symbols, but their image remains powerful. They are fragile. They hide the fire only until the appointed moment. When they break, the light appears. That is what the whole story has been doing, breaking the visible strength down until something else can be seen. Gideon began hidden in a winepress. Israel lived hidden in fear. The torches were hidden inside jars. But by the end, what was hidden is brought into the open. Not Gideon's greatness, not Israel's military glory, the deliverance of God. Morning would come to a valley changed by panic, noise, and flight. The great camp of Midian had been broken, not by the army Israel expected to need, but through a victory shaped before the battle began. And the question left behind is not only how 300 men won. The deeper question is why they had to be only 300. The answer is written across the whole night, so that when the jars broke, when the torches rose, when Midian fled, Israel could not honestly say, "Our own strength saved us." That is the strange beauty of Gideon's battle. The victory was not made smaller because God lacked power. It was made smaller because Israel's pride was dangerous. A large victory can still leave the human heart unchanged if the people walk away believing they were their own rescuers. So before God delivers them from Midian, He delivers the story from the lie Israel might have told about itself. By the time the night ends, Gideon has not become the kind of hero who replaces God at the center. At his best in this moment, he becomes a witness. He obeys, he leads, he acts. But the shape of the victory has already made one thing clear. The battle was never designed to make Gideon look invincible. It was designed to make deliverance unmistakable. By the end of Gideon's story, the number 300 no longer feels like only a military detail. It becomes the heart of the mystery. Gideon's army was not reduced because the danger was small. The danger was enormous. Midian filled the valley like a living shadow. And Israel had already been crushed by years of fear, hunger, and hiding. The army was reduced because the victory was meant to reveal something that a larger army might have hidden. Gideon began as a man threshing wheat in a winepress, trying to survive without being seen. He was called a mighty warrior before he could believe it. He asked for signs because his faith trembled. Then, when he finally stood with an army, the army itself was stripped away until only 300 remained. And only then did the battle move into the night. The trumpets sounded, the jars shattered, the hidden torches burned. Midian's strength collapsed into confusion, and the people who had once made Israel hide began to flee through the darkness. This is not simply a story about doing more with less. It is a story about deliverance made unmistakable through weakness. The army had to become small, so the meaning of the victory could become clear. Gideon did not win because he became impressive enough to explain the miracle. Israel did not win because its strength finally matched Midian's. The victory was shaped so that every ordinary explanation would fall away. And that is why this ancient night still feels so powerful. Sometimes the story turns not when strength is added, but when false confidence is removed. Sometimes the moment before victory looks like loss, because the things we expected to depend on are being taken away. And sometimes, when the jar breaks, the light that was hidden inside becomes visible at last. Gideon's 300 stood in the dark with fragile vessels, hidden fire, and a command they could not fully control. Then the night changed, and Israel remembered, at least for a time, that the battle had never belonged to numbers alone.